bride was sent to the wrong ranch, but the little girl whispered, "God finally sent you to us." The train screeched to a halt in the middle of the quiet little station, dust swirling in the late afternoon sun. Clara stepped down carefully, her heart pounding beneath her lace-trimmed dress. She had traveled for days, leaving behind the crowded city where her future was uncertain, holding on to the promise of a new life. The ticket in her hand had been her escape, her courage, and her hope. She smoothed her bonnet nervously, clutching the small suitcase that carried everything she owned. The promise waiting at the end of her journey was a man she had never met, a man who had written kind words in letters, who had asked her to be his wife. He was supposed to be waiting here for her, at the Miller Ranch. She had imagined this moment countless times, his hand reaching for hers, a smile that would welcome her into a new chapter of life. But the platform was nearly empty, save for a few men unloading crates and a ranch hand scanning the crowd with searching eyes. Clara's heart sank as she realized no one had come forward for her. She lingered nervously, her suitcase feeling heavier by the minute, her throat dry with worry. That's when the ranch hand, tall and broad-shouldered with sunburned skin, called a name, not hers, but close enough for her weary mind to believe she had been found. His voice carried authority, as if there was no question she was the one he was here to collect. Too shy to correct him, too frightened to be left alone in a strange town with nowhere to go, Clara nodded and followed. The wagon ride from the station was quiet, the wheels creaking against the dirt road as the landscape stretched endlessly around her. Wide fields, fences running like lines on the horizon, and mountains painted purple by the setting sun. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Clara clutched her suitcase tighter, feeling the strangeness of it all. She told herself it didn't matter if this man had called her the wrong name. Surely things would be explained when they reached the ranch. Surely someone would recognize the mix-up. But when they arrived at the Dawson Ranch, no one questioned it. Instead, she was welcomed inside, shown a room, and treated as though she belonged. The ranch itself was vast, with sturdy barns, corral, fences, and horses grazing under the dimming sky. Yet there was a heaviness in the air, as though joy had long since fled. Clara stepped into the big farmhouse and was greeted by silence that seemed to echo through the halls. Then she saw him. Jacob Dawson, the owner of the ranch. He was a rugged man with grief etched into his face, his voice heavy with loss. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves, his hands rough from years of work. But it wasn't his strength that struck her most. It was the weariness in his eyes. 2 years earlier, his wife had died, leaving him to raise their little girl, Emma, alone. Since then, Jacob had closed himself off, running the ranch with stern discipline, his heart locked away. Emma peeked shyly from behind her father's leg. She was no older than 7, with wide blue eyes that studied Clara with curiosity. Clara smiled softly, but the girl only tilted her head as though she were searching for something Clara didn't yet understand. That night, Clara lay awake in the small room they had given her. She turned the truth over and over in her mind. This was the wrong ranch, the wrong man, the wrong family. She should have spoken up at the station, corrected the mistake, explained who she was supposed to marry. But the thought of leaving filled her with dread. She had nowhere else to go, no family waiting for her, no home to return to. And then, faintly through the thin walls, she heard it, the soft sobs of a little girl. Emma was crying herself to sleep. Clara pressed a hand to her chest, her heart aching. Perhaps this wasn't a mistake after all. Perhaps, she thought, God had placed her here for a reason. The next morning, Clara rose early. Instead of confessing the truth and leaving, she tied on an apron and walked into the kitchen. The smell of stale bread lingered in the air, and she quickly set about preparing breakfast. She cooked eggs, baked biscuits, and poured fresh milk, surprising the ranch hands who were used to plain, hastily made meals. Jacob walked in, surprised to see the table full, his daughter eating with delight. Clara didn't say much, but the look of contentment on Emma's face was enough. Later that day, Clara found Emma playing with a rag doll, the hem of her dress torn. Without hesitation, Clara sat beside her and began stitching it carefully. She hummed softly as she worked, a lullaby her mother had once sung. Emma leaned against her shoulder, her little body relaxing in the warmth of care she had missed for too long. And then Emma whispered it, her voice trembling with innocence and hope. "God finally sent you to us." Clara froze, her eyes burning, with sudden tears. Those words, spoken by a child, carried a faith she hadn't known she needed. She hugged Emma tightly, promising in her heart she would not abandon her. But Jacob wasn't so easily moved. He was polite, respectful, but distant. He made it clear Clara didn't need to stay, that he could arrange for her to be taken wherever she truly belonged. Yet every time Clara tried to leave, Emma clung to her skirts, begging her not to go. Clara's resolve weakened and she stayed. Days turned into weeks. Clara became part of the rhythm of their lives. She rose with the sun to help with chores, her laughter softening the edges of the house. She taught Emma how to bake bread, how to braid ribbons into her hair, how to pray at night without tears. Emma bloomed under Clara's care, her giggles, filling the halls like sunlight after a storm. Even the ranch hands noticed, tipping their hats to Clara with grateful smiles. But not all was easy. The ranch was struggling. A harsh drought had stolen the crops, and the cattle were weakening. Jacob bore the burden silently, refusing help from neighbors, determined to keep the ranch afloat by his own strength. Clara saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried, and longed to share it with him. But every time she tried, he turned away, pride keeping him locked behind his walls. Then came the storm. One night, as thunder rolled across the sky, lightning split the air and struck the barn. Flames erupted, spreading quickly, devouring wood and hay. Jacob rushed into the fire to save the animals, his figure swallowed by smoke. Without hesitation, Clara grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her to safety before running after him. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking, but Clara refused to leave. Together, she and Jacob fought the fire, hauling buckets of water, cutting loose the terrified horses. Her dress tore, her arms burned, but she did not stop. When at last the fire was out, Jacob collapsed in the mud, his chest heaving, tears streaking through the soot on his face. For years he had buried his grief, his pain, but that night it all came pouring out. Clara knelt beside him, not with pity, but with strength. She placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You don't have to carry it all alone." Those words sank deeper than she knew. For the first time in years, Jacob allowed himself to weep. He wept for his wife, for his burdens, for the loneliness he had endured. And in that moment, he realized Clara was no stranger. She was the answer to a prayer he hadn't dared to pray. From that night on, something changed. Jacob softened, little by little. He listened when Clara spoke. He accepted her help with the ranch, and he watched as Emma clung to her like the mother she had lost. Slowly, Jacob began to believe what Emma had whispered from the start, that Clara wasn't an accident, but a blessing. As the weeks turned to months, Clara could no longer keep the truth buried. She sat with Jacob one evening and confessed everything, that she had never meant to come to their ranch, that her journey had been meant for another. She expected anger, disappointment, maybe even rejection, but Jacob simply took her hand gently and said, "Maybe the letters got lost, Clara, but I believe God doesn't make mistakes." Her eyes filled with tears, her heart swelling with a peace she had never known. For the first time since she left the city, she felt like she had truly found home. By spring, the ranch began to heal. The rains returned, the grass grew green again, and laughter filled the Dawson home. Emma no longer cried at night. She had a mother's love once more. And Jacob, slowly but surely, allowed himself to love again. It all began with a wrong turn, a mistaken name at a train station, and a little, "Girls," whispered Faith, "God finally sent you to us."